Welcome on in, guys. Three bold takes. And as you can see, Quinn is back with us, ladies and gentlemen. So glad to have him back. It just was not the same without him. But before we get into my overreaction, we are sponsored by SeatGeek. You can use our discount code 3boldtakes to get $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's $20 off your first purchase. Thank you, SeatGeek, for allowing us to push that and to help out our viewers of the channel. Now, my overreaction. This is the best year to initiate a 12-team playoff we've ever had. And I know it's not an overreaction, but I say this because I think it needs to be talked about. There's legitimately four teams from the SEC that could make the playoffs. There's four teams from the Big Ten that could make the playoffs. There's four teams from the ACC that could make the playoffs. And there's three teams from the Big 12 that can make the playoffs, plus the group of five representative. So that's a lot
and
of football teams. And
and
you
Notre
got
Dame.
and Notre Dame, exactly. So that's a lot of football teams that coming down. We're coming in on week 10, the first playoff rankings. This is going to be huge to see where they value certain programs at starting now. And we're gearing up for the best, I think, 4-week stretch of college, 5 weeks counting conference championships we've ever seen in this era. And I'm here for it. And all these people that talk about the 12-team playoff is going to ruin, the regular season and this and that. I think it's heightened it. I'm going to be honest with you because you've got teams for instance, we'll just use Georgia, for example, right? Like every single game is a playoff elimination game. Alabama, every single game is a playoff elimination game. Ohio State, every single game is and it's no longer the sense of and I think competitive balance within the sport has helped this, right? Quinn, you mentioned before we started that the SEC has such great competitive balance this year compared to every other conference. That's why people are losing at a higher clip than normal in the conference. And I think that's countrywide, right? Like that is all across the country. You've got Pitt that's 7-0. You've got SMU that's doing things. Like you've got Iowa State, freaking BYU. Like you've got these teams that are pulling together that we didn't anticipate happening. Could you imagine this year if we were still in a 14 playoff?
Oh,
That
it would be awful.
Think about Florida State last year thinking that they deserved it. There could have been 4 or 5, 6 teams that felt what Florida State felt last year. But this year we get the luxury of a 12-team playoff. And I think the playoffs are going to be unreal. A lot of people was saying that, yeah, 12-team playoffs cool and all, but the first couple rounds are just going to be blowouts because the top teams are going to be so much better than the others. That's not true this year. And I am so excited and I'm here for it. And I cannot wait to see what the playoff selection committee is going to do this coming up week, I guess next week, to give us a little hint on the potential for the playoff. Not an overreaction, but more so like I love it. I love where the sport's going right now.
Yeah, I'll say this. A lot of people said that it's going to devalue the regular season games, right? Because back in the old format, one loss felt like a dagger because you were like, all right, well, at least two teams are going to go undefeated most years. Usually it was only one and then the best one loss team. And then when you got to the 14 playoff, you lost more than once and it was a dagger. You were done.
Yeah.
That's not the case anymore. Like strength of schedule means a lot, and you stay in the race based on who you've beaten and who you've lost to. And there's way more teams that feel like they're in like that Alabama Missouri this past weekend felt like a huge game because both teams knew you win, your playoff chances are still there. You lose, they're shot. It's over because of the math of who Missouri had left and who they had beaten. They needed that win in Tuscaloosa, right?
Yeah.
And now, that's happening every weekend. Now, sure, there's games that don't feel that instrument like that big. Like Oregon, Ohio State was a big game, but you knew like, okay, you can lose it and nothing's really going to change as far as your
Right.
chances to make the playoff, except whoever loses it actually has pressure because Oregon can still lose a game right now, and
Mhm.
it like they're fine.
Yeah.
Ohio State They lose to Penn State, and now you start looking at their schedule and you go, well, what's your big win?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Which they also still have Indiana. So that's, who would have ever thought that we'd be
Yes.
saying Indiana, but they're having an amazing season right now in Bloomington. It's dude, this is the only pushback I'll give you, just to give some little bit of pushback. 07 maybe would have been a better year to have a 12-team playoff, because 2007 was just absolutely insane.
Well, we're creeping up
But
on the number of upsets from unranked teams and ranked teams that we had in that year. So, like, we're
we
getting
are.
close to being that level of chaos.
I remember texting you guys, I think it was in week 5, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's 2007. Like, we're
Yep.
in 2007 again. Like, but I think the difference is it's NIL. It's NIL in the transfer portal. It's what's made this much parity.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of people don't want to hear it because there's no like guardrails on it. And I do think we need to have some guardrails.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, it's hard to argue. The proof's in the pudding. Look how much more competitive, now that we're a couple years deep into this, that the college football landscape has gotten. Because let's be real, the reason Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson and Georgia was doing right there at the end of it all, went on the tears they went on, is they hoarded all of the 5-star talent 3 band deep in every position. So you had these other teams in their own conference that were trying to go out there and beat second stringers that were better than their starters. And it just, like, the depth was there. So like, if a guy gets hurt, the guy that plugs in for him is better than your guy, and you didn't even know who he was. Like, and that those days are going away. Now, don't get me wrong, the top end teams are still deeper, but it's not to the level that it was. And then it was exacerbated by the 14 playoff, made it feel like making the playoff was end all be all. And it was the same handful of teams always making the playoffs, so they just kept getting all the talent. I think now with a 12-team playoff, that's still going to be what defines success. If you make the playoff, you had a successful year, and there's more teams that get to say they did that.
Yeah. I kind of like what you said, because I've been a big proponent of not liking the 12-team playoff. I'll start there. Chase has not liked the 12-team playoff. I didn't like any kind of playoff. I was more of a BCS kind of a guy. But Jordan Rogers did make a good point on SEC Nation leading into the Alabama game, which I'll kind of touched on. But that was a playoff eliminator game for Missouri and Alabama. And so, and I'll say this, I think the 12-team playoff this year has more energy and vibes around it than the 14 playoff ever did. I don't know why. I truly don't, because I thought the 14 playoff, you sit on your seat a little bit more because, hey, if we lose this one game, there's a chance we don't make the 14 playoff. But in the 12-team playoff, it's kind of like, okay, well, we did lose to Oregon in that game, but we can still win another one, or we can win out, or we could even lose 2 and still be in the 12. So, like, are those games still as exciting? Somehow they are, even with the chances of losing and it not having to matter as much. And I think my biggest thing for me, which I thought was funny for a lot of fans, was like, well, we want the 12-team playoff because the SEC is dominating the playoffs every year. I think that's hilarious, because I think more SEC teams are going to be probably in the playoffs this year. And I haven't heard a gripe yet. Maybe it's because it's not the end of the season. We'll probably hear it next week, actually, when the CFB playoffs come out. The rankings, the first ones come out. So we'll probably hear it then. But there's a chance, like, teams like Ole Miss, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, whatever, like Alabama with 2 losses, that's not a playoff team to me right now at all. And there's a chance that they're going to be top 10 in the playoffs. And the fact of there's going to be a couple teams that are on the outside in that are saying, hey, we deserve to be there over them. I think you might have SEC should have the most playoff teams in the 12-team playoff this year, probably. So I think that's kind of funny to me. And then lastly, the only pushback I have after watching the Notre Dame Navy game this weekend, I really hate that we're giving a spot to a group of 5 team, because I'm thinking about it as well as last year. We just saw Liberty get upset by the statistically worst team in all of football in Kennesaw State. They got upset. They were the group of 5 representative last year. And the Navy, who was probably top 5 for a lot of people, just got blown out by Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's a good team, but they're not an elite team like Georgia. Because like if Georgia doesn't win the SEC championship and they don't get the first round bye, they're probably sitting at 5. 5 is going to play that group of 5 team. I mean, are we expecting a group of 5 team, Boise State, Memphis, whoever, to play Georgia and play them well?
Let me give you a little bit of pushback on that. And I know it was only week 2, but let's be real. What G5 teams get in the bid?
It's Boise State, and they
Boise
played
State.
Oregon closer than anybody.
They played
Ohio
Oregon
State.
They played Oregon week 2 on the road and lost by a field goal. So
They do.
Boise State, now Army and Navy, I'm with you. I don't think they can hang, but Boise State can.
Yep. And I think if it's teams like that, then there's a chance, right? Like, yes, they screwed the pooch and put Liberty in last year. Now, we knew that was a bad choice when it happened, right? Like, we knew that. But when you look at a team like Boise State or, somebody like that, or heck, I think even Memphis could give a team a run for their money and make a competitive game. I don't think they'd win. But I think you could see it up. Yeah, I mean, I think you could see it up there.
Cincinnati, Houston, back in the days, all those teams could have done it in the early rounds. So I'm not saying they would have won a title. But some of the teams with flaws.
Exactly. So I think it's possible.
Well, and then there's another thing with the group of 5 team, because we all know why they chose Liberty. The only reason Liberty got chosen last year was because they were undefeated. And so is that something you go with this year? Boise State's already lost one, yes, to Oregon, but they've lost. Memphis, I believe, has lost by now as well. I think the only undefeated group of 5 team is Army currently.
Yep.
So, and Boise State's ranked higher currently, but do you take do you take Army because they're undefeated and put them in the group of 5? Or do you look at strength of schedule, who they lost to, and the players that they have on their team, like Boise State, and put them in?
Well, I think it's because of the fact that, and let's be real, last year there really wasn't a better, I hate to say there wasn't a better group of 5 representative, because I think there was. However, when you look at the rankings, right, like right now, Boise State is ranked so far ahead of Army, and if they both win out and are conference champions, there's going to be no debate on, well, Army's undefeated. Okay, you're right. However, Boise State is ranked higher already starting off. So I think that's going to play a lot into it, is where these initial rankings are for those teams specifically.
I think strength of schedule is also about to make it was always used kind of in the 14 playoff era, but not really. The 14 playoff was kind of easy. It was basically who are the 4 best conference champions. Sometimes Alabama and Georgia were both so good that we can't leave them out. Like that's pretty much what the 14 playoff was for its entire existence. With the 12-team playoff, you have to start taking into account strength of schedule, because record doesn't mean everything. And I think we're about to see that too. I think strength of schedule is going to be taken into effect way more now in the 12-team playoff era than it has in probably any era ever, other than the BCS, when you're trying to split hairs between 3 teams that all have the same record. So I don't really think that we're going to see an issue with the Liberty selection like we did before. And I don't think you're going to see an issue when you're starting to try to debate a 1-loss ACC team and a 2-loss SEC team. I think everyone kind of understands that SEC team played a lot more difficult games week in, week out than the ACC team did. Now, people are going to get on national media and debate the other way around, and your record is what it says you is, but everyone knows that's not true. Like, you know that. And you go ask an NFL scout how many guys are coming out of Mississippi State's roster, and then go ask them how many are coming out of Syracuse, and it's about equal, believe it or not. Like as many games as Mississippi State has dropped, you wouldn't think that, but it's the truth. And it's the same thing with like Auburn, and Auburn's trash, right?
Yep.
Like, so then what does it say about the higher end teams in that? And I want to point out too, I don't think the SEC is like leagues ahead of the Big Ten, but I do think those 2 are leagues ahead of everybody else. I think there's a big gap. Yeah, like there's a big gap after that. There's still teams at the top end that are good that can hang with them. Like I think a Miami can hang with anybody. But year in, year out, the ACC from top to bottom isn't going to be that deep.
Yeah. Well, Hey, this has been a great discussion so far. We're almost at the 15-minute mark, which is awesome for us and to be able to talk, and it does not feel like it just flies by. Guys, let us know down below what you guys think about it. Is this the perfect year for the 12-team playoff to be introduced? Is there a year in previous that we're overlooking? Do you still hate the idea of the 12-team playoff? Just let us know down below what you think about that.
I want to remind you, we are sponsored by SeatGeek. Use our code 3BoldTags. Get $20 off your first purchase with SeatGeek. I love them. Use them for every event I go to. Cannot ask for a better app to get your tickets for any event, not just sports. But now, that being said, guys, it's time to get into my overreaction for week 9 of the college football season. I got on here in the preseason and I said, I hyped Colorado up way too much last year. I was hyping them up to be a 7-win team, make a bowl game, first year under Deion. And I told you that a successful year for Colorado would be to get 4 or 5 wins. I thought their schedule was harder in 2024 than it was in 2023. I even said if they got 3, it would be improvement. Guys, they're 6-2.
They are.
We're only 8 games deep into 2024, and the Colorado Buffaloes are bowl eligible. I don't know if you saw the clip of him calling the 99-year-old super fan after they won that game, telling her they got a game ball for her and that they're going to mail it out to her since she couldn't make it to the game where they won bowl eligibility. I love it. I'm so happy for Deion and the guys. They're actually walking the walk this year that they've been talking, and it's super impressive. I think we're looking at, I think this Colorado team, I don't want to say they're going to get double-digit wins this year, but there's a chance. They need, 4 more W's in what's going to be 5 more games. It's not likely, but we're definitely looking at an 8-win football team in Colorado this year. No doubt in my mind. They're easily going to get 8. This is so far beyond a successful year. This is a great year. Now, can they follow it up next year when they lose Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders? Probably not. But let's not talk about, we're talking about 2024. And this Colorado team is legit. Now, they're not going to the Big 12 title. I hate to bust anybody's bubble. Iowa State and BYU got to lose first. And I don't think that's going to happen. But what a successful year for Deion and the guys. And I just wanted to get on here and give them their flowers, because this is so far beyond what I thought they had to do to actually get to a successful year. They're reaching great, almost go home and write about it level success from where they were last year to where they are this year.
Yeah, I guess I could go next here. Yeah, dude, and I'll be honest with you, it's been fun to watch Colorado so far this year win, right? Like, they're an exciting team to watch play. And that's one of the things that the problems I had last year was, yeah, they're an exciting team to watch, but they just lost every single time that they were in a close game. A game that was in, I guess, technically, late night for them, but the only game on, right? So you're getting that last little fix of college football before you go to bed. And they couldn't get it done. But if you look at this year, I do want to point out one thing. I think we thought their schedule was harder this year than it was last year because we thought certain teams were going to be better than they were. For instance, like UCF, they destroyed UCF. UCF preseason was a dark horse to win the Big 12 or make the championship game. They are nowhere near that at this point and probably won't be for the next couple of years. Arizona looks worse than we initially thought. Now, we knew that they were going to take a step back this year from last year, but we didn't know that they were going to be as bad as they actually are. Baylor, I think we kind of assumed that they would get a tad bit better than they were last year, but I haven't seen it. I think they've actually gotten worse this year than they have been the past couple of years. But I say all that to say you can't fault Colorado for that. I hate when teams play teams on their schedule and win, and it's like, well, they hadn't played anybody. That's not their fault. They're playing the teams that's on their schedule. They have no control over how good UCF is or Baylor is or Arizona is. They just go out and play the games. And when I look at their remaining 4 games, listen, dude, Utah's not any good. Like, that's been the biggest disappointment in all of college football to me is Utah. But Texas Tech is not great. Kansas sucks. And Oklahoma State is in a downward spiral. There is a legitimate chance, and they also get Utah and Oklahoma State at home, which would be their two toughest games to me, because I think they're going to beat Kansas no problem and beat Texas Tech no problem. So you get them at home. There's a legitimate chance here that they could finish 10-2 with one conference loss, and we're talking playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think we're talking playoffs.
I actually don't disagree there, because you look at the back end of the schedule, you have, I think all of them are bottom part of the Big 12, if I'm not mistaken. Oklahoma State's dead last in the Big 12. Utah's 1-4, and then Texas Tech is the only one that has 2 or more wins, I believe it is, if I'm looking correctly. Yeah. Kansas is 1-4. So like you're facing 3 of the bottom 4 teams in the back end of your schedule. Freddie, you're not off there. And I think the biggest thing last year to this year, and is what I said, was they're going to be in a lot of close games in 2023. They're brand new. Deion's brand new. They're probably going to lose a couple of these close games. I think they had like 7 games that were a touchdown or less last season. I might be wrong on that, but I think that's what it was. And they lost a couple of those, which made them end up, I think, like 6-7, whatever they ended last year. But now they've matured a year, they've grown a year, they've kind of put some of that crap to the side that they did, and they're able to win some of these closer games, pulling it out against Cincinnati, pulling it out against North Dakota State, game 1. You lose to Nebraska, and you lose to Kansas State, who's above you in the rankings in the Big 12. This is a good ball team, a really good ball team. Again, like Quinn said, what about next year? This is not next year. We're going to focus on here right now. And the thing I saw on Twitter, I saw somebody tweet it out. It might have been like George Schwartz or something. But he said, for so long, Colorado, people don't want to give them their flowers because they were trying to hype them up when they weren't a good team. This is the time to give them their flowers. This is a good ball team. They are worthy of a top 4 seeding in the Big 12 right now. And if they continue to play, like, yeah, I don't think any of these people are going to be ranked when they play them at all. I don't think Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, or Oklahoma State will be ranked, but that has a chance to push them into the top 15 and potentially make a playoff win playoff bid if they can round out with 4 wins. I think if you lose one of these games, that you don't make the playoffs. But Colorado, this is a great ball team. Shedeur Sanders is playing very well. Has not had a lot of Heisman talk. I think he's played extremely well against the schedule. Travis Hunter is doing exactly what Travis Hunter has been doing, and I think he's even done it to a better standard this year than he did last year, playing both sides of the ball. And I think they even lost weapons compared to last year to this year, and they're still playing above their means. So Colorado is a wonderful football team, and yes, like Quinn said, they're daisies, tulips, roses, whatever. Give them their flowers, because this is a great ball team in 2024.
And I think, real quick, Quinn, and then I'll let
I'll
let you round it out. That's why I was so mad about Colorado last year, because they got up to be ranked 14th in the country through the first 2 games, and they beat a TCU team that had played in the national championship the year before. But we knew that team was not going to be good the next year. And after 2 games, they were ranked 15th in the country, and now here they are 6-2, and they're ranked 23rd. Like, this is how you rank a team, right? They were not very good last year. Watch them win and progress, and then you throw them in the rankings. You don't just skyrocket them just to put them in the rankings.
I'll say this right before we wrap up. My one issue with saying that this might be a playoff team is you look at the field, you got 4 spots locked up to conference champions, then you got the next 8. One's locked up by Notre Dame as long as they don't lose another game, and one of those is locked up by your own conference opponent, because Kansas State's ahead of you. So is Iowa State, so is BYU. And with SMU, Pitt, and Clemson all being good, there's probably going to be another from the ACC. And then strength of schedule is what's going to hurt them, because you're going to get a lot of SEC and Big Ten teams thrown in the back end. That's my only issue with saying they're going to be a playoff team, is I think they're just too far out of the punching zone.
Which is SeatGeek. They are part of 3 Bold Takes as always. If you use our discount code 3 Bold Takes, you get $20 off your first purchase. Now that Quinn's back, we got to slide SeatGeek over. So technically there's 4 of us now. But yes, our partners at SeatGeek, guys, use our discount code for $20 off your first ticket purchase. 3 Bold Takes, guys. And with all 3 of us back, what's a better way of bringing Quinn back in unless we do some overreactions? All right. We just finished week 9 of college football, guys. Do you remember in the summer when we were just saying I can't wait for college football to be here, and now we're going into week 10 next week? That's insane. But for me, I'm just going to spout it off here. I want to start this one. I've loved college football so far. There are so many things that are happening that I did not see coming, and one of them, which is my overreaction, is that Texas A&M is going to be one of 4 teams to get a bye seed for winning the SEC championship. They just probably played their hardest game to this date in LSU. You made a statement against Missouri. You just beat LSU under the lights at home at night. And then you have South Carolina, New Mexico State, Auburn, and then you get Texas at home. Their hardest game to end the season is Texas. And Texas A&M has got it. They lost their first game of the season, but Mike Elko has reined this team in. They've beaten almost everybody except for they've beaten who they needed to by double digits. They beat Florida by 13. They beat Missouri by 31. They beat Mississippi State by 10, and then they just beat LSU by 15. I mean, nothing else to say. And even in this LSU game, they even traded out their starter, Weigman, and to bring in the freshman Marcel Reed to give them a little bit different of a look. And you heard LSU say that they didn't have a game plan for this kid. Texas A&M is going to be one of the 4 teams to have a bye in the playoffs at the end of this season.
Look, I got one problem with that. Is Alabama on Georgia's schedule after week, 5? Does Alabama appear on Georgia's schedule for the rest of the year?
No.
Then what does that mean? They're going to go to Atlanta. They're going to meet A&M, maybe, and they will beat A&M in Atlanta when A&M has to play a road game in Georgia. Period. Like that. I'm sorry. Like, look, I'm rooting for A&M just as much as the next guy. I love Mike Elko. I'm happy to see A&M turn stuff around. They're not going to get through Georgia. Georgia turned it on back in Austin. I don't see them turning it back off. They're going to run through Ole Miss and Oxford. They're going to run through Tennessee and Athens. They will be in Atlanta, and they will kill whoever walks into Atlanta unless somehow, some way, Alabama finds themselves in Atlanta, because that seems to be the only team that Kirby Smart can't beat.
I don't really, I'll be honest, I don't really know if I have a rebuttal to that, Chase, because from what I've seen so far, and this is a team that they lost in week 1. Nobody talked about them from then on out. They've been sliding under the radar. Now, I will say this. They've been sliding under the radar. Now you're a top 10 team. Now you've got implications of, okay, we could make the SEC title. We could make the playoffs. How does Texas A&M respond under year 1 of Mike Elko? That's my question. And if you look at the schedule, they travel to Auburn the second game, the second to last game of the year. And Auburn's notorious for upsetting teams at home when either they're A, ranked number 1, or B, they have a legitimate shot to make the SEC title, the playoffs. Like, they are really good at ruining dreams. And that's a game that I'm looking to. If they can beat Auburn convincingly, we could be talking about a national championship run here for Texas A&M.
Hey, hold on. I want to say this. It's not just Auburn. You also have a trip to South Carolina this weekend. And
True.
They're coming off of a bye week, and that is also a venue that is infamous for ruining teams' seasons.
Easily Tennessee.
Easily a trap game for there with South Carolina, because South Carolina had Alabama up in Williams-Brice, and Alabama almost got upset following their Vandy upset. And I think they struggle with South Carolina because South Carolina's defense is really underrated this season. And I think they probably struggle with Auburn. Both of those are road games. But when you look at that schedule, those last 4 games compared to Georgia's last 5, Georgia has Florida, Ole Miss, Tennessee all in a row, no breaks. And then they get UMass and Georgia Tech to end the season.
Is
So
Tennessee not a home game for Georgia? I thought
It
Tennessee
is.
was in
It
Athens. Okay.
Yep.
Ole Miss is the only one on the road out of those 5. Well, Florida's the neutral, of course.
Yeah.
But I think I came into saying this because Texas A&M, that is an easy schedule between the South Carolina and New Mexico State game. If you finish off South Carolina, you also have a bye week going into the New Mexico State to finish out the season as well. And, I'm not even going to lie to you. I did not think about them probably playing Georgia in Atlanta. That's a tough game. But I did not think I'd be sitting here near November saying, Mike Elko and Texas A&M, if you don't get to the SEC championship, it's a failure. Because looking at these final 4 games, you should probably be in Atlanta, more than likely, because you also get Texas at home with the time to be determined. And I'm gonna guess it's going to be a night game to end the season for those teams.
Oh, absolutely.
So if that ends up being a night game like you just had with LSU, and you can upset Texas, it's crazy to say that Mike Elko and Texas A&M, you have to be in the SEC championship. But I think they have a legitimate shot to be one of the 4 teams at the end of the year to be in the playoffs, living off a first-round bye, which is I didn't think I'd be sitting here saying that about Texas A&M at all this season.
I didn't think I'd be sitting here saying they'd have a chance to make it to Atlanta or even have a chance to make the playoffs, period. I thought that we were going to be looking at another, 7-5, 8-4 type year in Elko's first year. Now I love the hire, and I think that this is going to be a recipe that's going to stay for a significant period of time as long as Elko can stay there and keep his guys there. But I didn't think it would happen this quickly.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. I thought we were talking maybe year 2, maybe year 3 that we see Elko finally turn the ship around in Texas A&M. But dude, it happened quick, and credit to them. I mean, everyone was highlighting the Lone Star Showdown at the end of the year, happy that it was coming back, and they're going to turn it into what might be a game to get to Atlanta.
Yeah,
not to super forecast, but there's a good chance that the winner of that game goes to Atlanta and the loser stays home.
Dude, those tickets right now are more expensive than the Super Bowl on average.
Really?
Just want you guys to realize that. Yes.
The one in Kyle Field?
Yes.
For A&M in Texas? Wow.
A&M in Texas. I saw where the cheapest ticket was around $800 to get into the game.
Talk about that game's going to be loud. That's going to be it might be the most wild atmosphere in college football this entire season.
And my phone will be on Do Not Disturb during that game. I'm going to be locked into watching it.
Yeah, well, let us know what you think about Texas A&M. Currently, they sit at first in the SEC conference, the only undefeated SEC team this season thus far, of course. But guys, let us know what you think about Texas A&M, and if they have a shot to be one of the 4 teams to have a first-round bye going into the playoffs, guys. That was the Texas A&M overreaction for Chase. Guys, for Quinn, Chase, and Freddie, it's 3 bold takes as always. And for our 4th partner, SeatGeek, make sure you use our discount code to get $20 off your first ticket purchase using 3 bold takes. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. 3 bold takes. We're out.